the reek of antiseptic claws at my throat. Fighting a losing battle against Carol's sickly sweet air freshener. It's a nauseating fog that clings to Dad's room. Thick with dread. I stand at the desk, the medication chart spread before me. Not just notes, but a map of betrayal. Each entry feels like a punch. My name is Clara Jennings. I'm 34 years old. Lavender clung to the air, thick and sweet, mixing with the musty scent of old paper in Dad's study. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, illuminating dust motes that twirled like tiny dancers. I eased the cushions beneath his head, an instinctive, practiced motion by now, and asked, "Comfortable?" A faint smile creased his lips. "Immeasurably. You possess a healer's touch, my dear." I laughed it off. "Just doing my duty, Dad," though the praise warmed me more than the afternoon sun. His brow felt as thin as parchment beneath my fingers, so different from the strong hands that used to toss me sky high when I was small. "An angel in disguise," he insisted, squeezing my hand with surprising firmness. "There's someone I'd like you to meet, Clara." My stomach nodded. I'd heard vague references to a friend, someone from his literary group, but caring for him had occupied every spare neuron in my brain. "Really?" "Her name is Carol," he said softly. "She's been a tremendous comfort. Especially since the diagnosis?" I finished for him. He nodded, eyes clouding. Right on cue, Carol burst through the doorway in a riot of cloying floral perfume and forced cheer. Age was hard to place, her face carried just enough cosmetic artillery to keep me guessing. "Robert, darling, tease up." She deposited a china cup on the side table, then turned those overly bright eyes on me. "And you must be Clara. Robert never stops talking about you." I rose and offered my hand. Her grip was almost aggressive. "Pleasure to meet you, Carol." "The delight is mine, dear." Her gaze swept over me, cool and appraising. A chill raced down my spine, though I couldn't name why. Weeks slipped by. Carol became a permanent fixture, hovering, chattering, showering Dad with little trinkets. To be fair, he did seem lighter, laughter came more easily, a spark had returned. I needed, to believe she was good for him. Yet something inside me hummed in warning. One evening I lined up Dad's medications. Chemotherapy had shredded his memory, so we'd created a strict schedule. "Feeling okay?" I asked, handing him water. "Hazy," he admitted. "Carol gave me something new, a pain reliever," she said. He squinted at the bottle, uncertain. I eyed the unfamiliar label. "No Dr. Evans anywhere." Ice trickled through my veins. That night, I pored over his medical files, cross-checking every prescription against the pills Carol supplied. The pattern emerged slowly but unmistakably. She was shaving down his morphine doses, letting him ache, then topping him off with sedatives that left him limp and compliant. My heart slammed against my ribs. Why? The answer arrived like rot creeping through a floorboard: Dad's life insurance policy. Carol was bleeding him toward the payout. I couldn't confront her, yet. I needed evidence. And Dad needed protection. The antiseptic bite of rubbing alcohol fought a losing battle against Carol's sugary air freshener. I studied Dad's medication chart, another underdose of morphine, Carol's swoopy signature sealing the lie. Dad dozed fitfully, skin drawn tight over his cheekbones. Carol perched nearby, pretending to read a magazine, her eyes flicking to the door as though waiting for applause. Later she brewed tea, china cup, splash of milk, 2 sugars, Dad's ritual. But her back lingered at the sugar bowl. A tiny, almost elegant flick of her wrist. Poison? No, probably another sedative. She turned, all dimples and devotion, and Dad took a grateful sip. Enough. I called Emily, my closest friend, former nursing school partner, and moral compass. Got a minute? Always. What's up? I unloaded everything, the dosage discrepancies, the blank stare Dad wore after Carol's special tea, the gnawing certainty in my gut. Emily listened through the hum of her fridge. "Trust your instincts," she said at last. "People will do anything for money. I need proof before I confront her." "Then document everything," she replied. "Hidden cameras. Meticulous logs. Chain of custody on the meds. And Clara, don't do this alone." Her faith steadied me. "Thank you," I whispered. I was starting to feel crazy. "You're the least crazy person I know," she assured me. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow, we hunt." I returned to Dad's bedside. His breathing was shallow, uneven. I took his papery hand and felt a fierce protectiveness roar to life. "I'm here, Dad," I murmured. "I won't leave you. Not for a second." Because the time for gentle caregiving had ended. This was war, and I was ready to fight. I crept through the unnaturally quiet house, every step echoing in time with the frantic beating of my heart. Dad was napping in his room, a fragile stillness that always sent a shiver of fear down my spine. Carol had left for her weekly bridge game, clinging to some social obligation that I found deeply unsettling. It was the perfect opportunity. I moved with a practiced stealth, my footsteps muted by the thick carpet as I made my way to the guest room Carol had claimed as her own. Unlike the rest of the house, this room was an exhibition of her taste, a garish collection of porcelain dolls and an array of perfumed candles that filled the air with a cloying, suffocating floral scent. Nausea prickled at the back of my throat as I took it all in. After my careful survey, I located the small, locked cabinet where Carol kept Dad's medications. The key was predictably hidden inside a decorative porcelain cat box, its painted eyes seeming to mock my every effort. With a careful twist, I unlocked the cabinet. Inside lay an array of pill bottles, each neatly labeled with Dad's name and the drug prescribed. Methodically, I began comparing the medication list from Dad's oncologist with what I saw before me. The first few bottles were in order, but then I reached the metoprolol. The dosage on that bottle was significantly lower than what had been prescribed. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't a mere error. Next, I reached for the bottle of oxycodone, Dad's pain medication. The refill date still looked recent, yet the bottle felt deceptively light. I unscrewed the cap and counted the pills. There were far fewer than there should have been given the refill date and the dosage. Carol had been shorting him. My hands trembled as I pulled out my laptop, which I had discreetly placed on the bedside table before starting my investigation. Fingers flying over the keyboard, I typed out my findings. Metoprolol, dosage discrepancy. Prescribed 50 milligrams, bottle indicated 25 milligrams. Oxycodone, pill count inconsistent with the refill and the prescribed dosage. Suspect underdosing. I quickly opened a browser window to research further. The results were alarming. Untreated hypertension from the lowered metoprolol dosage could result in dizziness, fatigue, and even a stroke or heart attack. Carol wasn't just withholding proper pain relief, she was actively endangering Dad's health. I dug deeper into the potential side effects of opioid withdrawal from the inconsistent dosing: anxiety, insomnia, restlessness, agitation, and increased pain sensitivity. These were all the symptoms Dad had been experiencing lately, though Carol dismissed them as just part of the process. I slammed my laptop shut, the sound echoing in the oppressive silence of the room. A burning rage surged through me. How could Carol be so callous, so utterly devoid of empathy? Dad was a kind, gentle man, and here she was, slowly and deliberately torturing him, all for money. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Its pages were already filled with my observations and suspicions. I meticulously documented everything: detailed sketches of the pill bottles, the discrepancies in dosages, the dates, and the subtle evidence that confirmed my worst fears. This notebook was my weapon, my shield, my proof. Just then, a floorboard creaked outside the door. I froze, every sense on high alert. I quickly returned the medication bottles to the cabinet, relocked it, and replaced the key in its hiding spot. I closed my laptop and tucked it back into my bag as my heart hammered in my chest. The door creaked open, and there she stood, Carol, with a forced smile plastered on her face. "Clara, darling. I didn't expect to see you here." Just checking on your father, she cooed. I forced my voice to remain calm and steady. Yes, I just wanted to make sure he was comfortable. He seemed a little restless earlier. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and I saw her smile falter. He's fine. Just sleeping. You worry too much, Clara. Perhaps, I replied, meeting her gaze. But someone has to. Carol chuckled, a hollow, brittle sound, and added, well, I'm here now. Why don't you go get some fresh air? You look a little pale. I nodded, relieved to step away from the suffocating tension of that room. I think I will. I'll see you later, Carol. As I left, an unsettling feeling nagged at me, like Carol sensed that something was amiss. I needed to be more careful, more deliberate. The stakes had never been higher, Dad's life depended on it. The digital camera felt cold and heavy in my hand as I moved stealthily through the silent corridors. Every click of the shutter was an act of rebellion against this oppressive silence, a way to capture the truth piece by piece. I snapped detailed photos of the labels on Dad's medications, the faded pharmacy script, the precise dosage instructions that Carol pretended to adhere to, the batch numbers that could someday lead back to her. I took each picture from multiple angles, careful not to leave any predictable pattern behind. After securing enough evidence with the camera, I shifted my focus to the financial documents. Carol had always been obsessively careful with money, almost to the point of paranoia. I knew that uncovering something concrete about her financial motives would be essential. Just yesterday, when Carol was busy grocery shopping, I had created a fake document on Dad's computer, a fabricated investment account statement showing a significantly larger sum than he actually had. I even went further, crafting a convincing email exchange with a fictional financial advisor. Now, I rearranged the papers on Dad's desk, placing the doctored statement in a prominent yet inconspicuous spot beneath a pile of bills. It was a calculated risk, one designed to provoke Carol into reacting and, hopefully, exposing her true nature. Back in the kitchen, while pretending to prepare Dad's lunch, I kept a vigilant eye on the hallway. My ears strained at every creak of the floorboards, betraying the movements of everyone in the house. I rinsed the vegetables with a slow, deliberate calm, the metallic tang of the water a stark counterpoint to the sweetness of the ripening tomatoes on the windowsill. It wasn't long before Carol emerged from Dad's room, her expression a carefully composed mask of weary concern. He's sleeping, she murmured, her voice low. I think he had a rough night. I nodded, offering what I hoped was a sympathetic smile. He did seem restless earlier. I'll check on him again soon. I casually turned my gaze toward the hallway. Did you need something from his desk? I saw you heading that way. Carol hesitated ever so slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Just looking for a pen, she replied smoothly. After a brief pause, she added too casually, did you happen to see any new financial statements lying around? Dad's been a bit confused lately, misplacing things. Feigning innocence, I said, no, I haven't seen anything. I've mostly been focused on his medication and meals. As I resumed chopping vegetables, the rhythmic thud of my knife against the cutting board served as a steady counterpoint to the frantic beating of my heart. Later that afternoon, I took another bold step. With Carol momentarily distracted by a phone call, I subtly altered Dad's will. I didn't change any names or figures, but I inserted a clause requiring a full accounting of his assets to be conducted by an independent auditor after his death. It was a minor change, nearly invisible, but it would certainly throw a wrench into Carol's carefully laid plans. As dusk settled, long shadows crept across the living room. I sat beside Dad, reading aloud from his favorite book, trying to mask the tension that had become as thick as the lamplight's glow. I kept Carol in my peripheral vision, watching the way she fidgeted and how her gaze kept drifting back to Dad's room. I knew that the shadows were gathering, both literally and figuratively. I was collecting my evidence, Carol was weaving her web of secrets, and the truth lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to burst forth. I knew the game had begun. And I was determined to win. I stared at Carol, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Carol. I know what you're doing. Her carefully constructed facade began to crack right before my eyes, the smile that never reached her eyes faltered, and she shifted uneasily. I don't know what you're talking about. But her gaze darted around the room like a trapped animal, betraying every ounce of her anxiety. That vial, I said, pointing to the small glass bottle on the counter, its contents glinting innocently in the kitchen light. What's in it? And don't tell me it's some kind of vitamin supplement. I'm a nurse, remember? I know what those look like. She stammered, her hands twisting in her lap. It's just something to help him sleep. He's been so restless. Without a doctor's prescription? Without even telling me, his daughter? You expect me to believe that? I picked up the vial, holding it up to the light. The liquid was clear, almost like water, but I knew better. My training screamed at me that this was no harmless tonic. I'm going to have this analyzed. And then we'll see what kind of sleeping aid you've been giving my father. Panic flared in her eyes, wild and desperate. You wouldn't. Oh, I would, I shot back, my voice hard as steel, fueled by the fury that had been building for weeks. And I will. Unless you tell me the truth. Now. Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her like air from a punctured balloon. She mumbled, avoiding my gaze, it's a sedative. Just a little something to make things easier for him. And for me. Easier for you to get your hands on his money, you mean? My voice dripped with contempt, the words tasting like bile. You're poisoning him, Carol. You're intentionally trying to kill him. Her composure shattered completely. No. That's not true. I would never, but the tears welling in her eyes didn't fool me, they felt rehearsed, manipulative, like everything else about her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, my thumb pressing record before she could react. Then you won't mind repeating that, will you? Tell me again how you're not trying to kill my father. Her eyes widened in horror, her face paling. She lunged for the phone, her nails scraping the air, but I sidestepped her easily, my heart pounding with a mix of triumph and adrenaline. She wasn't getting away with this, not anymore. Stay away from me, I warned, my voice sharp as a blade, my body tense as I held the phone out of her reach. Now, tell me everything. What's in that vial? How long have you been doing this? Who else is involved? Carol's resistance crumbled, her shoulders sagging like a puppet with cut strings. Cornered, she let the confession spill out, a torrent of greed and desperation that made my stomach churn. She admitted to altering Dad's medications, to pressuring him to change his will, to everything. Each word fueled the cold fury building inside me, a fire that burned hotter with every damning detail. I kept the phone recording, capturing it all, her excuses, her lies, her pathetic pleas for forgiveness. By the time she stopped, breathless and sobbing, she'd sealed her own fate. I switched off the recording, the silence in the room heavy, broken only by Dad's shallow breathing from the next room. It's over, Carol, I said, my voice flat, stripped of emotion. I have everything I need. You're not going to hurt my father anymore. The sterile scent of lemon cleaner in Detective Davis's office did nothing to mask the underlying stench of stale coffee and despair. I sat stiffly in the hard plastic chair, the USB drive in my hand feeling heavier than it should, a physical weight of everything I'd uncovered. Davis, his face etched with a permanent weariness, leaned back in his chair, his gaze sizing me up. So, Miss Jennings, he began, his voice gravelly, you're claiming your stepmother is intentionally harming your father? Yes, I said, forcing my voice to stay firm despite the tremor in my hands. I have evidence. Recordings, medication logs, everything. I slid the USB drive across the desk, watching as he picked it up, turning it over in his fingers like it might bite. And this evidence. It shows Carol adding a sedative to my father's morphine drip. A sedative he wasn't prescribed. It also includes a recording of her admitting she's doing it to expedite things. The words tasted like ash, bitter and choking. Davis plugged the drive into his computer, his expression unreadable as the files loaded. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the machine and the frantic beat of my heart. Finally, he clicked on the audio file. Carol's voice filled the small office, dripping with false sympathy and cold calculation. I watched Davis's face, searching for a reaction, my chest tight. When the recording ended, he swiveled his chair to face me. The cynicism in his eyes seemed to soften, replaced by something I dared to hope was respect. "This is compelling, Ms. Jennings. Very compelling." "It's the truth," I said, relief washing over me in a dizzying wave. "My father deserves justice." "Justice," Davis echoed, a wry smile twisting his lips. "Justice is a long road. But this gives us a starting point." He picked up his phone and punched in a number. "Get Clara Jennings down here for questioning. And flag her passport." He hung up and turned back to me. "She'll be here shortly. In the meantime, tell me everything. Everything you've seen, everything you suspect." For the next 2 hours, I poured it all out, every detail, every inconsistency, every gut feeling that had led me to this point. Davis listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions, his pen scratching furiously across a notepad. The call came an hour later. "Jennings is here," a voice crackled from the phone on his desk. "In the waiting room." Davis steepled his fingers, his gaze meeting mine. "Ready for Act 2, Ms. Jennings?" Carol entered the office with an air of practiced grief, her eyes red-rimmed, her voice trembling. "Detective," she said, her voice a delicate whisper, "what is the meaning of this?" "I was just at Robert's bedside." "Please, have a seat, Mrs. Jennings," Davis said, his tone polite but firm, gesturing to the chair I just vacated. Carol perched on the edge of it, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the picture of a grieving caregiver. "We're just trying to understand Mr. Jennings's current medical condition," Davis continued, his voice deceptively gentle. "Perhaps you could walk me through his medication schedule?" Carol launched into a well-rehearsed explanation, rattling off dosages and frequencies with an air of concerned efficiency. Davis let her speak, his expression impassive, until she finished. "And are you aware of any other medications Mr. Jennings might be receiving?" Davis asked casually. Carol hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "No, of course not. Just what the doctor prescribed." Davis leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "Are you absolutely certain about that, Mrs. Jennings?" He reached for his computer mouse, clicking on the audio file. Carol's voice, so recently filled with grief and concern, now echoed through the room in a cold, calculating confession. The blood drained from her face. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the brittle, desperate woman beneath. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice losing its practiced tremor. "Don't you?" Davis asked, his voice hardening. "Because I think you do." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "Mrs. Jennings, you're under arrest for attempted murder." The blue and red lights pulsed against the living room walls, painting grotesque shadows that danced with my anxiety. I sat stiffly on the edge of the floral armchair, the scent of lavender potpourri doing nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. Detective Davis, his face grim, supervised the search. 2 officers methodically sifted through Carol's belongings, their movements precise and efficient. Drawers were emptied, purses appended, even the contents of her meticulously organized spice rack examined. "Anything?" Davis asked, his voice low. One of the officers held up a small, unmarked bottle filled with white pills. "Looks like diazepam, detective. No prescription label." Davis nodded, his gaze hardening as he turned towards me. "These match the pills you identified in your statement?" "Yes," I confirmed, my voice barely a whisper, my throat tight. "Those are definitely the ones." She claimed they were just sleeping aids. For herself. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Carol, who had been sitting silently on the sofa, her face a mask of bewildered innocence, suddenly began to tremble. Her carefully applied makeup seemed to crack under the strain, revealing the fear beneath. I don't understand," she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. "What is happening? What are you doing?" Davis approached her, his expression unreadable. Clara Jennings, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Robert Jennings. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Carol gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. No. This is a mistake. A terrible mistake. You have the right to remain silent, Davis continued, his voice unwavering as he recited the Miranda rights. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Carol's protests grew louder, more frantic, as the officers moved to handcuff her. Clara! Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. I would never hurt your father. I watched, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Her performance was pathetic, a desperate attempt to salvage a situation that had spiraled out of her control. I saw no remorse in her eyes, only self-preservation. I told you, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I know what you've been doing. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Carol's carefully constructed facade completely crumbled. Her face contorted with rage, her eyes blazing with venom. You bitch, she screamed. You'll regret this. You'll all regret this. The officers led her towards the door, her struggles becoming weaker with each step. As they passed me, Carol lunged forward, attempting to claw at my face. An officer quickly intervened, pulling her back. Get away from her, the officer barked. Davis gave me a curt nod. We'll be in touch. We'll need a more detailed statement once we've processed the evidence. I watched from the window as Carol was escorted into the back of a police car. The flashing lights illuminated her face, highlighting the fury and desperation etched into her features. The car pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the night. A wave of exhaustion washed over me. The relief I had anticipated felt strangely hollow. I had exposed Carol, saved my father, but the ordeal had left me emotionally drained, like a battlefield littered with the debris of a brutal war. The scent of lavender potpourri now seemed cloying, suffocating. I needed fresh air, a sense of normalcy, anything to dispel the lingering feeling of dread. Turning from the window, I noticed that the officers had finished their search. The house felt violated, its carefully curated order disrupted by the intrusion of law enforcement. I knew it would take time to restore a sense of peace, to erase the stain of Carol's presence. But for the first time in months, a sliver of hope emerged. My father was safe. And justice, however slow, was finally being served. The morning of the trial pressed down on me like a humid blanket, thick with anticipation and dread. I'd spent the last few days holed up in my apartment, reviewing my notes, rehearsing my testimony, trying to steel myself for what was coming. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Carol's face, twisted in fury as the officers led her away. But beneath the anxiety, a sliver of resolve gleamed. I owed this to Dad. I chose a simple, dark blue dress, its severity a kind of armor against the stares and whispers I knew would greet me. As I straightened it in the mirror, I saw not just my own reflection, but my father's face superimposed over mine, a silent plea for justice. The courthouse buzzed with a kind of oppressive energy. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashing, questions flying. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, flanked by Detective Davis, who cut a path through the crowd. Inside, the courtroom felt cavernous, all polished wood and hushed voices. Carol sat at the defendant's table, her usual composure replaced by a taut, skeletal mask. When her eyes met mine, I saw a flicker of something, fear, hatred, maybe both. Ms. Evans, the prosecutor, guided me through my testimony. Her voice was calm but carried a steely edge. I recounted everything, the notes I'd taken, the discrepancies in Dad's medication, the subtle changes in his demeanor. I spoke of Carol's obsession with his will, the hushed phone calls, the veiled comments about his time running out. Each word felt like a stone dropped into the silent courtroom. Ms. Evans presented the evidence, the unmarked diazepam, the altered medication logs, the pharmacist's expert testimony. I watched as the puzzle pieces I'd gathered formed a damning portrait of Carol's deceit. Then came the moment of truth. Ms. Evans turned to me, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Ms. Jennings, can you state, in your own words, why you believe the defendant attempted to harm your father? I took a deep breath, my gaze unwavering. She wanted his money. She saw him as an obstacle, an inconvenience. She systematically undermined his health, hoping to hasten his death and inherit his estate. The courtroom held its breath. Carol shifted in her seat, her knuckles white as she gripped the table. The defense attorney tried to rattle me, painting me as a resentful daughter, questioning my motives, my qualifications, my emotional state. But I'd anticipated his tactics. "Isn't it true, Miss Jennings, that you resented your stepmother's presence in your father's life?" he pressed. "I resented her manipulation and her abuse of my father's trust," I replied, my voice ringing with conviction. "My feelings are irrelevant. The evidence speaks for itself." Carol watched me with disbelief and fury. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling, her performance as the grieving widow exposed as a cruel charade. She wanted to scream, to silence me, but she stayed silent, rage simmering beneath the surface. The cross-examination continued, but I held firm. I had spoken my truth, laid bare my suspicions, and presented the evidence. Now, it was up to the jury. As I stepped down from the witness stand, I caught Detective Davis's eye. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. I had done all I could. The weight on my chest hadn't lifted, but the air felt a little cleaner, a little lighter. I'd given my father a voice. I hoped it would finally bring him justice. The courtroom air was thick with anticipation. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, painting dust motes in golden swirls. My fingers, bone-white, clutched the edge of the bench as I waited for the verdict. From the gallery, Detective Davis offered a silent, steadying nod. Carol sat ramrod straight, her face a mask of icy detachment, but her hands trembled. Judge Thompson's voice cut through the hush. "The court has weighed the evidence, considered the testimonies, and deliberated upon the arguments. The verdict, the defendant, Clara Jennings, is found guilty on all counts." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Relief washed over me, so potent it nearly knocked me off my feet. Justice, however belated, had prevailed. Carol's composure shattered. Wordless anguish twisted her features, her eyes wide with shock and fury. Deputies moved in, flanking her. As she was escorted past me, her gaze collided with mine, a venomous glare that chilled me to the bone. Later, outside the courthouse, Detective Davis found me. "The appeal is inevitable," he sighed, fatigue etched deep in his face. "But the proof was irrefutable. You did a courageous thing, Clara." I managed a wan smile. "It's not truly over until Dad is at peace." The days that followed became a cycle of devotion and care. Dad was released from the hospital and I settled him into the sunroom, overlooking his beloved roses. I transformed it into a haven, soft throws, cherished photographs, the soothing whisper of lavender. I kept vigil, holding his hand, reading passages from his favorite books. Some days, he was lucid, reminiscing about family trips in a voice that was raspy but present. Other times, he faded in and out, pain creasing his brow despite the medication. I tended to his needs, adjusting his pillows, dabbing his forehead, murmuring reassurances. One afternoon, his eyes fluttered open. "I know what you did, Clara," he breathed. I squeezed his hand. "I love you, Dad. I only wanted to keep you safe." A faint smile touched his lips. "I know. And you did. My savior." As autumn deepened, the days shrank and the garden's colors faded. Dad's strength ebbed, his breath growing shallow. I stayed by his side, catching sleep in the armchair, rising at every sound. One sunset, the sky ablaze with orange and purple, he stirred. "Clara," he rasped. "I'm here, Dad." I leaned in, my heart aching. He raised a trembling hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't mourn for me, sweetheart," he whispered. "I've had a full life. And I know I'm loved." Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I managed to smile. "We all love you so much, Dad." He closed his eyes, his features softening. I cradled his hand, stroking his fragile skin, recounting stories from my childhood, reminding him of all the love that filled our lives. As the last light faded, his breathing slowed, then stopped. His hand went still in mine. He was gone. I stayed there for a long time, clutching his hand, tears falling freely. The ache was profound, a gaping emptiness in my soul. Yet, beneath the grief, a sense of peace settled over me. He was safe now. He was free. He left this world knowing he was cherished, defended by the daughter who loved him without bounds. I gently closed his eyelids, smoothed his hair, and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Rest easy, Dad," I whispered. "You've earned it." The air was thick with the scent of lavender, a reminder of the love that sheltered him in his final moments. Life would never be the same. But I would carry his love and memory with me, an unwavering beacon against the darkness. The days after Dad's passing were a blur of grief and quiet resolve. I buried him beside Mom, the grave marked with a simple headstone inscribed with his favorite quote, "Love is not diminished by death." The funeral was small, intimate, just family and a few close friends. Carol, of course, was absent. Her appeal had failed, her lies exposed for all to see. She'd been sentenced to 20 years, her greed finally catching up to her. I returned to the house afterward, the silence deafening. Every room held echoes of Dad, his laughter, his stories, the way he'd hum old show tunes while making coffee. But there was also the stench of Carol's betrayal, lingering like a stain. I knew I couldn't live there anymore. Not after what had happened. I spent the next few weeks sorting through Dad's belongings, packing away his books, his clothes, his cherished mementos. Among his papers, I found something that made me pause, a sealed envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter, written in his shaky handwriting. "My dearest Clara. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I hope you know how much I love you. You've been my rock, my anchor, especially these last few months. I'm sorry for the pain Carol caused you. I should have seen it sooner, but I was blinded by the idea of companionship, I suppose. But you saw the truth. You fought for it. And because of you, justice was served. I'm at peace knowing that. I'm at peace knowing you'll carry on, that you'll honor my memory by living your life fully, by loving fiercely, just as you've always loved me. Don't carry the weight of my death, sweetheart. Let it go. Live. Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. With all my love. Dad." Tears blurred my vision as I read the words. He'd known. He'd understood. And he'd forgiven me for not being able to save him sooner. I sold the house soon after, unable to bear the memories it held. The proceeds went into a trust fund for Dad's favorite charity, a children's hospital he'd supported for years. It felt right, somehow. A way to honor his legacy, to turn the darkness Carol had brought into our lives into something good. As for Carol, I heard through Detective Davis that she'd been transferred to a maximum security facility. She'd filed multiple appeals, all denied. Her greed had cost her everything, her freedom, her reputation, even the fake sympathy she'd once traded on. I hoped she rotted there, alone and unloved. I moved to a small coastal town, a place where the ocean met the sky in a perpetual embrace. I took a job as a nurse at a local clinic, caring for the elderly, the sick, the forgotten. It felt like a kind of penance, a way to atone for the anger I'd carried for so long. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I received a letter from the prison. It was from Carol. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, her handwriting shaky and desperate. "Clara, I know you hate me. You have every right to. But I'm writing to ask for forgiveness. Not for my sake, but for yours. You can't carry this anger forever. It'll eat you alive, just like it did me. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for hurting your father. I'm sorry for hurting you. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Carol." I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fire pit, watching as the flames consumed it. Forgiveness wasn't something I was ready to offer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as I sat there, watching the stars emerge one by one, I felt a strange sense of closure. Carol had been exposed, her betrayal laid bare for all to see. She'd paid the price for her greed, and I'd ensured that Dad's memory remained untarnished. I stood up, brushing the dust from my hands, and walked back into the house. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the weight of the past, free from the shadows Carol had cast over our lives. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I knew Dad was watching over me, his love a constant presence in my heart. Carol's downfall is complete, her betrayal exposed, her greed punished. Clara finds peace not in forgiveness, but in moving forward, honoring her father's memory by living a life filled with purpose and love. The story closes on a note of quiet triumph, with Clara finally free to embrace the future without the weight of the past. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.